10 minutes before walking into the church, I heard my fiancé confess his true plans, not knowing I'd already uncovered every single one of his secrets months ago. I could have called the whole thing off right there, but I decided to do something no one in that church would ever forget. "Relax, man. She's completely head over heels for you." Rick's confident voice echoed through the hallway next to the vestry. "Valentina doesn't suspect a thing." I pressed my ear against the cold wall, feeling my heart race violently. On the other side, dressed in my French lace wedding dress that cost a fortune, I heard the conversation that would change everything forever. "She's more naive than I imagined." Leonardo, my fiancé, responded with a tone I'd never heard before. Cold, calculated, stripped of any trace of the caring man I thought I knew. 8 months of dating, and the little princess still believes I fell for her at first sight. My breathing stopped completely. 8 months, exactly how long we'd been together. Every romantic dinner, every declaration of love, every intimate moment I thought was real. "What about her father?" Rick asked, with the curiosity of someone admiring a well-calculated move. "Anthony Vasquez is richer than I imagined." Leonardo chuckled low, a sound that made my blood freeze in my veins. "His construction company is worth over $2 billion. When I become the official son-in-law, I'll get the international contracts I need to never have to work for anyone ever again." I leaned my forehead against the icy wall, trying to process each poisonous word. How was I so completely blind? How could a professional detective be fooled so easily? "But don't you feel anything for her?" Rick insisted with a tone that suggested even he thought the situation was too cruel. "I feel gratitude," Leonardo answered without hesitating for even a second. "Valentina is my winning lottery ticket, beautiful enough not to raise suspicion, smart enough to impress the family, and daughter of the most influential man in the country's construction industry." I closed my eyes tightly, vividly remembering how we met 8 months ago at a cafe in Soho. He had accidentally knocked over my documents and offered to buy me coffee as an apology. What a perfect romantic coincidence, or not so coincidental after all. "What about the first one?" Rick asked, lowering his tone as if revealing a dangerous secret. "Mariana?" My blood completely froze. "First? What first wife?" "Mariana was my test run, my pilot project," Leonardo explained with a coldness that made me shiver. 2 years of fake marriage in London. I got complete access to my father-in-law's multi-million-dollar businesses. I established my entire network of contacts in Europe. When I didn't need her anymore, I arranged an amicable divorce, and she even thanked me for being such an understanding husband. I felt my legs dangerously weaken. A first wife. How did I, a detective specializing in matrimonial fraud, not know this? And she never suspected anything? Rick sounded genuinely impressed. "Please," Leonardo let out a cruel laugh that echoed through the hallway. Mariana was too in love to see beyond her own romantic delusions, exactly like Valentina now. Women in love are predictable, manipulable, and completely blind to reality. Each word was a direct stab to the heart, but at the same time something inside me was strangely calm, almost cold. Maybe because deep in my subconscious a part of me had known the truth for weeks. I remembered small details my trained mind had automatically catalogued, but my heart in love chose to ignore. The calls he'd cut short when I arrived. The weekends he said he was visiting his sick mother, but never invited me to meet her. The way he always changed the subject when I asked about ex-girlfriends. And especially that time 3 weeks ago, when we ran into an acquaintance of mine at the mall. Leonardo got visibly nervous, suggesting we leave quickly. At the time I thought it was shyness. Now I understood it was fear of being recognized. My criminology training had taught me that professional con artists always leave traces, no matter how careful they are. The problem is when you're emotionally involved, your analytical capacity gets compromised. That's exactly why I always advised my clients. Never ignore your intuition. It's processing information your conscious mind hasn't organized yet. And there's something else, Leonardo continued, his voice gaining a tone of cruel satisfaction that made my stomach turn. Valentina herself is going to make things even easier for me. How so? She mentioned yesterday that she wants to personally introduce me to some of her father's main business partners at the wedding reception. Imagine that. In one single night, I'll meet the owners of the biggest construction companies on the East Coast. It's first-class networking served on a silver platter. Rick chuckled low. Man, you really thought of everything. Of course, I did, Leonardo responded with evident pride. Every move was calculated down to the smallest detail, from the first casual encounter at the cafe to proposing in front of the entire family. Everything planned to generate maximum trust and credibility. I felt a strange mix of nausea and professional admiration. As a detective, I had to acknowledge that Leonardo was extraordinarily competent at what he did. He had studied my family, my habits, my emotional vulnerabilities with the precision of an experienced professional. Dude, you're ice cold, Rick murmured with a mixture of admiration and discomfort. I'm strategic, Leonardo corrected with pride. Beauty, charm, and intelligence are work tools, and I know how to use each one with surgical precision to get exactly what I want. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mixture of piercing pain and profound relief, because finally, after 8 long months of small doubts I tried to ignore, I had the brutal confirmation that part of me needed to hear. My name is Valentina Vasquez. I'm 28 years old. I graduated in criminology from NYU with a specialization in criminal psychology, and for 5 years I've worked as a private detective. My specialty? Investigating complex cases of infidelity and matrimonial fraud. What Leonardo Mitchell didn't know is that I wasn't just his next innocent victim. I was the most relentless detective in New York City, and he had just confessed all his crimes to the wrong person. The office was engulfed in the typical silence of a rainy Monday when Mariana Stevens walked through the door. Her red and swollen eyes told a story I knew all too well. Another broken heart desperately needing the truth, however painful it might be. Detective Vasquez? She asked hesitantly, her voice loaded with a fragility that contrasted with her expensive clothes. You can call me Valentina, I replied, gently indicating the leather chair across from me. How can I help you? Mariana sat carefully, wringing her hands nervously in an anxious dance I recognized immediately. She was a beautiful woman around 35, with designer clothes that couldn't hide her obvious emotional fragility. It's about my ex-husband, she began, her voice trembling like leaves in the wind. Leonardo Mitchell. We divorced 6 months ago, but something doesn't add up. Something is very wrong. What specifically bothers you, Mrs. Stevens? During our 2-year marriage, Leonardo always traveled a lot for work, she explained, choosing each word carefully. He's an engineer for a respected multinational company and always had important projects overseas. I never questioned it because I trusted him completely, blindly even. And now something has changed your perspective. Mariana hesitated, as if the next words were physically too difficult to come out of her throat. A friend of mine saw him at a restaurant here in the city, very intimate with a young, beautiful woman. When I confronted Leonardo about this, he said it was just business, just work. But she paused, breathing deeply. He had a wedding ring on his right hand, as if he'd taken it off his left too quickly when he realized that he'd been seen. My professional interest sharpened immediately. Cases of bigamists and matrimonial con artists weren't rare in my office, but something about this story had different nuances. Mrs. Stevens, what exactly do you want me to investigate? I want to know if Leonardo is getting married again, she responded, her voice gaining a determination that wasn't there at the beginning. And if he is, I want to know with whom, when, how, and especially Why? I need the complete truth to be able to move forward with my life. Mariana opened her designer purse and pulled out a meticulously organized folder, clearly prepared in advance. I brought absolutely everything, she said, sliding the folder across my mahogany desk. Photos from different periods, old and current addresses, even his complete social media profiles. I opened the folder carefully, and on the first page was a recent headshot of Leonardo Mitchell, a really attractive man around 35, dark hair impeccably cut, penetrating light eyes, charming smile that would probably melt any woman in seconds. But there was something in his eyes that immediately caught my attention. As a detective, you learn to read micro-expression, and there was a calculating coldness in Leonardo's gaze that contrasted with his apparently warm smile. That was exactly part of the problem. Mariana sighed deeply. Leonardo always knew how to use his natural charm to his advantage, with surgical precision. I continued flipping through the documents, making mental notes. There were photos of the couple on expensive trips, Paris, London, Barcelona. Leonardo always perfectly dressed, always at the right angle, always with his protective arm around Mariana in a way that seemed genuinely loving. Mrs. Stevens, can I ask some more specific questions about his behavior? Of course, anything that might help. Did Leonardo ever show excessive interest in your family's business? Mariana blushed slightly, clearly uncomfortable with the question. Now that you ask, yes. From the first month of dating, he asked many questions about my father's company. He said he felt fascinated by successful family entrepreneurship. What kind of questions, specifically? Details about contracts, international partnerships, annual revenue volume. At the time, I found it romantic that he wanted to know all aspects of my life, including the family business. Another giant red flag. Genuine romantic interest is very different from investigative curiosity about family wealth. And financially, how did your relationship work? I always insisted on splitting all bills, Mariana explained, pride evident in her voice. I never wanted anyone to think I was a gold digger or financially dependent. But did Leonardo accept this easily? He not only accepted it, but insisted that I pay my share, she replied, and for the first time I detected bitterness in her voice. He said he respected my independence too much to allow me to be kept. Interesting. That was an intelligent tactic. By insisting Mariana pay her own bills, Leonardo avoided seeming like a gold digger, while simultaneously benefiting from her lifestyle without investing his own resources. Mrs. Stevens, what exactly was the financial dynamic of your relationship? She hesitated visibly before answering. My father has a very successful import company in London, she explained hesitantly. Leonardo always showed genuine and impressive interest in the family business, so Dad naturally ended up hiring his company for some specific projects. Projects of what financial magnitude? Very, very large, she confirmed, her voice becoming more tense. Over £5 million in contracts distributed throughout our marriage. There it was, the first giant red flag blinking in neon. And when you divorced, what exactly happened to those million-dollar contracts? Leonardo kept absolutely all of them, Mariana answered, bitterness evident in every syllable. 3 days later, I had Leonardo Mitchell's complete psychological and financial profile spread across my desk, like pieces of a complex puzzle. He was, in fact, a civil engineer for a respectable multinational company. He earned about $180,000 annually, an excellent salary, but nothing extraordinary to sustain the lifestyle he appeared to have. He owned a financed apartment on the Upper East Side, a car from the previous year, and surprisingly no outstanding debts in his name. But there were huge and inexplicable gaps, complete periods of 6 months where he simply vanished from all American records, coinciding perfectly with his alleged international work trips. And even more interesting, there was absolutely no official marriage record between Leonardo Mitchell and Mariana Stevens in the United States. 2 days later, with help from a reliable contact in London, I discovered that Leonardo and Mariana had indeed been officially married in the UK. But there was something even more interesting, a record of his entry into the country exactly 6 months before the wedding. He had arrived completely alone, with no confirmed job, and somehow mysteriously managed not only to get a respectable position, but direct access to the most exclusive and closed business circles in the country. The answer came when I managed to locate old photos of them at British social events. Leonardo always strategically positioned next to Mariana, meeting influential businessmen, doing calculated networking, building relationships that would later result in multi-million-dollar contracts. He wasn't just an amateur opportunistic con artist. He was a highly sophisticated professional with a meticulous plan. I spent the next 3 days immersed in a deep investigation that revealed a frighteningly sophisticated pattern. Leonardo wasn't an impulsive scammer. He was a long-term strategist with almost military methodology. Through international contacts, I discovered he had spent 2 years studying the British market before even moving there. He knew exactly which business families had single daughters in the ideal age range. He knew which social events they frequented, even which cafes and restaurants they usually visited. The meeting with Mariana wasn't casual. It was the result of months of detailed observation and planning. I found records of Leonardo frequenting the same places as Mariana for at least 3 months before officially meeting her. He had studied her habits like a detective would study a suspect. Even more disturbing, I discovered evidence that Leonardo maintained a detailed digital file on potential targets. Through an ethical hacker who sometimes collaborates with me on complex cases, we gained access to an abandoned email account. What we found was shocking. Organized spreadsheets with names, ages, family financial situations, personalities, emotional vulnerabilities, like a database of romantic opportunities for financial exploitation. Mariana was listed as London Project, Phase 1. There were detailed notes about her personality: romantic idealist, seeks paternal approval, vulnerable to grand gestures, responds well to demonstrations of interest in family business. Each seduction strategy had been calculated based on this detailed psychological profile. The most frightening part, there were other names on the list. New York Project, Phase 2, was marked as in development, with a recent note: target identified, Valentina Vasquez, only daughter, father businessman, construction sector, psychological profile under analysis. My blood ran cold when I read my own name on that sinister spreadsheet. In the 4th week of intensive investigation, I finally managed to locate him through discreet surveillance. Leonardo religiously frequented a charming cafe in Soho every Monday morning before going to the office, always at the same time with military precision, 8:15 a.m. sharp. In person, Leonardo Mitchell was even significantly more attractive and charismatic than in the photographs. Tall, elegant, with that type of magnetic presence that made people instinctively turn to look. I took my documents from the table, purposely scattered in a disorganized way, and got up to go to the restroom, perfectly executing the first step of my plan. On the way back, I accidentally bumped into his table with enough force to dramatically knock all my important papers to the floor. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, pretending to be completely mortified by the situation. How embarrassing. I'm always such a klutz. "No problem at all," Leonardo said, immediately standing up to help me with genuine kindness. "Happens to anyone. Don't worry about it." Our hands touched lightly when we reached for the same paper simultaneously. The contact lasted exactly 3 seconds longer than would be socially normal. "Leonardo," he said, extending his free hand in a firm, warm handshake. "Valentina," I replied, accepting the handshake and maintaining direct eye contact. There was something magnetic about those light eyes, an intensity I could feel physically. "You don't seem to be having a particularly good day," he commented perceptively, noticing my purposely stressed expression. "Work," I sighed dramatically, running my hand through my hair. "Sometimes I seriously think about quitting everything and becoming a surfer on some deserted beach." He laughed genuinely, a contagious and completely natural laugh that caught me by surprise. "What line of work causes you so much stress?" "Law," I lied without blinking, maintaining firm eye contact. "Corporate law, dealing with big businessmen all day long. What about you?" "Civil engineering," he responded promptly. "I have days exactly like that too, believe me." "Thank you so much for the help, Leonardo," I said, preparing theatrically to leave. "Wait a moment," Leonardo called me, and there was something almost magnetic in his voice. "I know this might seem a bit forward on my part, but how about a quick coffee to offset work stress and start the day more positively?" I pretended to hesitate for some calculated seconds, biting my lower lip slightly. "I don't know. I have a super important meeting in exactly 1 hour. "Just 15 minutes, he insisted, with a smile that would probably melt any woman on the planet. "I solemnly promise it'll be worth every second." Okay then," I finally agreed, returning to his table with a shy smile. "But only 15 minutes, then I really have to run." It was exactly 8:32 a.m. on a Monday in March when I sat at Leonardo Mitchell's table for the first time. I couldn't even imagine, in that apparently innocent moment, that I was about to begin the most complicated, dangerous, and personal case of my entire career. "So corporate law," Leonardo said softly, stirring sugar into his coffee with elegant movements, "must be tremendously draining, dealing with such strong personalities all the time." "It has its intense moments," I replied carefully, maintaining my persona of a stressed but successful lawyer. "Especially when you work directly for major American businessmen. They often think they can buy absolutely everything, including people's loyalty." I observed his reaction with microscopic attention. There was an almost imperceptible gleam in his eyes, genuine and calculated interest simultaneously. "Businessmen at what level exactly?" "I can't speak too specifically," I said, purposely creating professional mystery. Strict professional confidentiality, you understand. "But let's say some of the biggest construction companies in New York and Boston are among my most important clients." Leonardo leaned slightly forward, a subtle movement I was specifically trained to notice and interpret. "What an interesting coincidence," he commented with studied naturalness. "My company works very extensively with the construction sector. I always run into people from the industry." We talked for exactly 19 minutes. He was unquestionably intelligent, articulate, extremely well-informed about art, international politics, financial markets, and business. The type of man who could intellectually conquer any woman within a few minutes of conversation. And he was, obviously, carefully evaluating me the entire time. During our initial conversation, I could observe Leonardo's techniques in action up close. It was like watching a master of psychological manipulation at work. He asked apparently casual questions, but each one was strategically directed to extract specific information. When I mentioned working with big businessmen, his eyes lit up almost imperceptibly, a sign an ordinary person would never notice, but my body language training caught immediately. "Do you live alone?" he asked, in an apparently casual way, while stirring his coffee. "Yes, I live alone," I replied, pretending not to notice the investigative nature of the question. "I have a small but cozy apartment on the Upper East Side." A lie. I lived in a large house with my father, but it was crucial to establish from the beginning that I didn't have constant family supervision. "That's cool. Total independence," He commented approvingly. I imagine your parents must be proud of their successful and independent daughter. There it was, the cue for me to talk about my family. My father is very proud, I replied, allowing a tone of genuine affection in my voice. He always encouraged me to build my own career, even though he has the means to support me comfortably. Leonardo caught the information about family financial situation immediately, though he disguised his reaction well. Does your father also work in law? No, he's a businessman, I said, leaving the information purposely vague. Construction sector, too, coincidentally. I observed with professional fascination how Leonardo processed this information. There was an almost imperceptible pause, less than half a second, where I could see the gears of his calculating mind working at full speed. Small world, he said, maintaining the perfectly calibrated casual tone. Maybe I know his company. Could be, I replied vaguely. Vasquez Construction. Not one of the biggest, but has a solid reputation. Another carefully calculated lie. Vasquez Construction was one of the 3 largest in the country, but I wanted to see how far Leonardo would investigate before revealing his true intention. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Leonardo demonstrating exactly the right level of interest, curious without seeming invasive, impressed without seeming fawning, attentive without seeming desperate. When we said goodbye, he lightly touched my arm, a subtle gesture of establishing initial physical intimacy that he probably used with all his victims. Valentina, he said with that devastating smile. It was really a pleasure meeting you. I hope we can talk again soon. I enjoyed it very much too, I replied, allowing a slight blush on my cheeks. Do you have a phone number? He asked, already with his phone in hand. I do, I said, providing a number I used specifically for investigations. When I left that cafe, I was absolutely certain of 2 things. Leonardo Mitchell was even more dangerous than I imagined, and I was about to enter a psychological game more complex than any previous case of my career. Leonardo, I said, as we walked outside the restaurant under the starry sky. Can I ask a somewhat personal question? Sure, you can ask anything. Have you ever been married before? There was an almost imperceptible pause before the answer. Exactly 2 seconds that spoke volumes. Once, yes, he responded, with a melancholic tone perfectly calibrated to generate empathy. But unfortunately it didn't work out. We were very different people, with incompatible dreams. At the end of the night, when he dropped me off at the fake address I had provided, Leonardo kissed me delicately. It was a technically perfect kiss, calculated precisely to be romantic, without seeming invasive, passionate without seeming desperate, confident without seeming arrogant. He knew exactly what he was doing in every movement. The perfect opportunity I had been waiting for finally arose on a rainy Thursday. Leonardo urgently needed to travel to Boston for 2 days for a critical business meeting, or at least, that's exactly what he told me with total conviction. In reality, through my specialized contacts in the field, I discovered he had absolutely no meetings scheduled in Boston. Using professional GPS tracking equipment I had discreetly installed in his car during one of our dates, I precisely located his real address, a middle-class house in Queens, in a quiet, family residential neighborhood. Thursday morning at 9 a.m. sharp, I rang the doorbell with my heart racing. A blonde woman opened the door, exactly the same one from the photographs I had secretly taken. "Can I help you with something?" she asked, polite but naturally cautious with a stranger at the door. "My name is Valentina," I said, using my real identity for the first time. "I'm a professional private detective. I would very much like to talk with you about Leonardo Mitchell." Her face changed completely and dramatically. First genuine surprise, then visible fear, then deep rage. "Come in quickly," she said, opening space and nervously looking toward the street. The house was modest, but impeccably maintained. Simple and functional furniture, warm family decoration, and everywhere, on every available surface, there were family photographs. Photos of Leonardo with the blonde woman in clearly intimate moments. Photos of Leonardo with a small child, a beautiful boy of approximately 2 years old. Photos of an apparently happy and united family. "My name is Carla," the woman said, serving me coffee in delicate cups. "And you said you're a private detective?" "Exactly. I was professionally hired to investigate Leonardo on suspicion of systematic matrimonial fraud." Carla let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the room. "Matrimonial fraud? That's too nice a nickname for what he really does. Could you explain exactly your relationship with him?" Carla sat across from me with an expression of someone who had been carrying a gigantic emotional weight for a long time. "Leonardo is my official husband for 3 complete years," she said directly, "and biological father of my son." I felt my stomach plummet violently to the basement. "Official husband? We got married at City Hall when I discovered I was pregnant," she explained, pain evident in her voice. "He said he wanted to do the right thing, be a responsible and present father." I showed her a photograph of me with Leonardo at a romantic restaurant. "Do you recognize this woman in the photo?" Carla looked at the image, and her face visibly contracted with physical pain. "It's you, isn't it?" she asked, more an inevitable statement than a question. "Yes, it's me. You're the rich and successful lawyer." My blood literally froze in my veins. "What? How do you know that?" Carla stood up determinedly and went to an old cabinet, from which she pulled out a bulky manila envelope. "Leonardo leaves absolutely everything meticulously documented," she said, handing me organized papers. Full names, professions, detailed addresses, family financial situations. It's like professional work for him. I opened the envelope with uncontrollably trembling hands. Inside were detailed files, professionally organized, about me, about Mariana, and about other women I didn't know. In my personal file, there was precise information I had never, ever told him. My father's full name, exact estimated value of the family's assets, real address of my house, real profession, private detective. "He knows I'm a detective," I murmured, incredulous and devastated. "Leonardo always knows absolutely everything about his victims," Carla responded, profound bitterness in every word. "That's exactly how he survives and thrives." "And since when has he known my true profession?" I asked, trying to control the tremor in my voice. Carla consulted Leonardo's detailed notes. "Since the 2nd week you met," she responded, each word like a punch to the gut. "Here it is. VV. Private detective specialized in matrimonial fraud. Maximum danger. Requires completely different strategy." I felt the world collapse around me. During all those months, I thought I was conducting a sophisticated secret investigation, when in reality, Leonardo knew exactly who I was from the beginning. "How did he find out?" "Leonardo has contacts in practically every sector," Carla explained, her voice loaded with resignation. "He hired an investigation company to do a complete background check on you 48 hours after your first meeting." She showed me a separate folder with my name. "Here's the complete report he commissioned. Your academic background, cases you've solved, even psychological analysis based on your social media." I read the document with growing horror. It was a complete professional dossier on my personal life and career, including a section titled "Neutralization Strategies: How to Make a Detective Fall in Love to the Point of Losing Professional Objectivity." "Valentina," Carla said gently, noticing my state of shock, "he didn't just know you were a detective. He specifically chose you because you represented the biggest challenge of his career." "How so?" "Leonardo likes to prove himself," she explained. "Fooling ordinary women was no longer stimulating enough for his ego. He wanted to prove he could seduce and manipulate even a specialist in discovering lies and fraud." I looked again at his notes about me. There was a section titled emotional vulnerability points, my close relationship with my father, my excessive dedication to work that isolated me from personal life, my tendency to be overly analytical in previous relationships. Every aspect of Leonardo's personality during our relationship had been specifically calibrated to target those vulnerabilities. He made himself a spontaneous romantic because my psychological profile indicated I needed more lightness in life. He showed genuine interest in my work because I tended to get involved with men who devalued my career. And you? I finally managed to ask, why do you stay with him knowing all this? Carla looked lovingly toward the hallway, where the happy sounds of a small child playing could be heard. Because of Matthew, she said, tears in her eyes. My son needs his father present, and I honestly don't have anywhere to go with a small child. But don't you have family? My parents died in an accident when Matthew was 6 months old, she explained, wiping her eyes. Leonardo took advantage of exactly that moment of extreme vulnerability to convince me to officially marry him. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Leonardo didn't just choose rich women. He chose women at specific moments of emotional fragility, when it would be easier to manipulate them. Carla, can I ask a delicate question? Is Leonardo violent with you? Physically, never, she responded quickly. But psychologically, he knows exactly how to destroy a person's self-esteem, using only words, always disguised as concern or help. How so? He convinced me I was an inadequate mother, that Matthew would be traumatized if he grew up without a father, that I could never support a child alone, always with logical arguments, never shouting or directly threatening. I immediately recognized the tactic, sophisticated psychological manipulation, also known as systematic gaslighting. Other women besides me and Mariana. Carla showed me more detailed files from the envelope, 5 different ones in the last 3 years. She said, her voice heavy, all daughters of rich and influential businessmen, all completely in love with him, all systematically deceived. What exactly happened to all of them? The pattern is always the same, Carla responded, consulting the organized notes. Phase 1, seduction and gaining trust. Phase 2, introduction to family and business circles. Phase 3, establishment of contracts or business partnerships. Phase 4, gradual disappearance. And they never suspected? How could they? Carla gave a bitter laugh. Leonardo is a professional actor. For each of them, he created a completely different personality, perfectly calibrated to what they needed emotionally. She showed me photos of Leonardo with different women. In some, he looked like a serious intellectual. In others, a relaxed adventurer. Always exactly what each woman found most attractive. Carla, I asked, deeply fearing the answer. Does Leonardo openly talk about plans to marry me? She nodded slowly, pain evident in her eyes. He said verbatim that you are the final piece of his puzzle. She responded, with your businessman father, he'll get enough international contracts to retire comfortably at 40, and after getting all that, then he'll simply disappear, she said, deep sadness tinging her voice, like he always does systematically. And Matthew and I will be alone again, with nothing. But you have marriage documents, legal rights. Valentina, Carla gently interrupted me. Leonardo is much smarter than that. Our marriage happened at a time when I was completely vulnerable and desperate. He made me sign several documents I didn't even read properly. I discovered later that I practically gave up any right to assets or alimony. The sophistication of Leonardo's scheme was terrifying. He wasn't just an opportunistic con artist. He was a systematic predator who meticulously studied every legal and psychological aspect of his operations. I left Carla's house with the devastating feeling that my entire world had completely collapsed. For 3 intense months, I had genuinely fallen in love with a man who simply didn't exist. Leonardo Mitchell was a complete fiction, A character carefully constructed specifically to seduce me, use me, and discard me when I was no longer useful. But he had made a fatal and irreversible mistake. He had gravely underestimated who I really was behind the facade. "Valentina, are you absolutely certain about this decision?" asked my father, Anthony Vasquez, while meticulously analyzing the documents I had compiled about Leonardo over months. We were in the private library of our house, an environment where I always felt completely safe to make the most important decisions of my life. "I have all the irrefutable evidence, Dad," I replied, showing the photos, recordings, and legal documents in an organized manner. "Leonardo Mitchell is a high-class professional matrimonial con artist, and he's planning to use me systematically to get million-dollar contracts with your construction company. This woman, Carla," he said, pointing to a photograph. "Would she be willing to testify legally against him?" "Yes, without hesitation. She's completely tired of living in that situation of emotional blackmail." "And the first wife over in London?" "Mariana also has devastating evidence, and she's completely willing to do whatever it takes to see Leonardo pay definitively for what he did." My father leaned back thoughtfully in the leather armchair. "Valentina, you know I can simply expose all this publicly right now, right? I can end his professional career in less than 24 hours. "I know that perfectly," I replied, "but I want to do this exactly my way." "What specific way?" I took a deep breath before revealing my complete plan. "Leonardo officially proposed to me last night. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. And you said exactly what?" "I said yes, that I accept marrying him." "Valentina, that's complete madness." "Dad, listen to me carefully," I insisted firmly. "Leonardo is planning an elaborate matrimonial fraud to gain access to our business. I'm going to give him exactly everything he wants. A public and lavish wedding, with our entire family present, all our influential business friends, all the social press covering it. And then what happens? Then I'm going to expose absolutely everything during the religious ceremony," I explained, feeling a determined coldness take complete control of me. "In front of everyone, with irrefutable proof, with witnesses present, with Carla and his son present at the church. Sweetheart, this is going to destroy him socially and professionally forever." "I know exactly that," I replied, without hesitating for even a second. "That's precisely what I intend to do." My father stayed silent for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what I was proposing. "Valentina, do you realize this is going to generate massive repercussions? The press, social media, the impact on our own reputation. That's exactly why," I explained, showing an additional folder I had prepared. "I've already contacted the right journalists, the right people. The story will be told from exactly the right angle. The detective who unmasked the con artist during her own wedding. What about Leonardo? Won't he simply flee when he realizes you know the truth?" "There won't be time," I replied, opening a detailed timeline. "The wedding is in 2 weeks. Leonardo is already completely focused on the benefits he'll get after the ceremony. He's convinced he fooled me perfectly." I showed my father recordings I had secretly made during the last few weeks. "Look how he talks to me now, Dad." He can't even hide his anxiety about getting access to the construction company's contracts. In the recordings, Leonardo could be heard asking increasingly direct questions about the family business, suggesting partnership opportunity, and even proposing that I formally introduce him to the main partner. "What if he gets suspicious and cancels the wedding?" "He won't cancel," I replied with absolute certainty. "His ego won't allow it. Leonardo is convinced he's intellectually superior to all the women he's ever deceived. The idea that one of them, especially a detective, has discovered the truth and is planning a counter-operation is simply inconceivable to him." "You seem very sure of that." "I am. I spent months studying his psychology, as intensely as he studied mine," I explained. "Leonardo is a classic narcissist. He genuinely believes he's smarter than everyone around him. That arrogance is his only real weakness. Over the next 2 weeks, we meticulously organized every detail. The wedding would be at a historic church in Manhattan, with 200 carefully selected guests, influential businessmen, politicians, opinion leaders, journalists. The ceremony would be live-streamed on the family's official social media. But there was something even my father didn't know. I had an additional motivation to do everything publicly and dramatically. During my investigation, I discovered that Leonardo was planning to apply the same scheme to at least 3 other different women in the coming months. There were notes in his files about potential next targets, young, successful women, daughters of businessmen in other states. Exposing Leonardo publicly wasn't just personal revenge. It was prevention. It was ensuring no other woman would go through what I, Mariana, and Carla went through. Leonardo was absolutely radiant with happiness during all the preparations. He thought he had achieved the ultimate score of his life, and maybe he really had. He just didn't know the score would be applied directly to him. It was exactly 7 a.m. when I woke up on my wedding day, or rather, the day of my elaborate revenge. Leonardo was in the vestry, impeccable in his designer tuxedo. When he saw me entering, his eyes lit up like fireworks. "My God, you look absolutely perfect," he said, trying to kiss me romantically. From my strategic position, I could discreetly see some of the special guests positioning themselves as planned. Detective Costa, elegantly dressed in civilian clothes, sitting in one of the front rows like a normal guest. 2 federal agents disguised as catering waiters. Mariana Stevens, at the back of the church, wearing dark glasses and a discreet dress to avoid drawing attention. And outside, in a car, with completely dark windows, Carla waited patiently with little Matthew. "Leonardo," I said, lovingly touching his arm, "can I ask you for something very special? Anything in the world, sweetheart. I want to make an exciting surprise during the ceremony. I'm going to give a special speech, very emotional and romantic. Can you tell the priest to give me a few extra minutes at the microphone?" He became absolutely radiant with happiness. "Of course. It's going to be beautiful. Everyone will be moved to tears. It's going to be very emotional indeed," I replied, smiling sweetly. He had no idea how emotionally devastating it would be. The ceremony begins. The traditional wedding march began to play solemnly. I walked slowly down the church aisle, observing each face of the guests. Powerful businessmen, influential politicians, opinion makers, people who had respected and admired my family for entire decades. Leonardo was at the altar, smiling with that devastating charm that had completely conquered me months ago. Now that smile only caused me physical nausea. "We now come to the sacred moment of vows," the priest announced solemnly. "Leonardo, would you like to begin?" Leonardo confidently stepped forward, took the microphone, and addressed the guests directly. "Dear friends, beloved family," he began, with his most charming and convincing voice. "Today is unquestionably the most important day of my entire life. Not just because I'm marrying the woman I love deeply, but because I'm officially joining one of the most respected and admired families in America." Some guests applauded politely. Therefore, with the generous blessing of my future father-in-law, I would like to publicly announce that I will assume the international vice presidency of Vasquez Construction, where I plan to... "Leonardo," I interrupted firmly, taking the microphone from his hand. He looked at me, genuinely surprised. "Honey, before you continue," I said, my voice echoing clearly through the silent church, "I also have a very important announcement to make." I made a discreet signal to the screen operator. "Dear guests," I began, observing each face in the church, "you came here today expecting to see a traditional wedding, and you're going to see something truly unforgettable." The light dramatically dimmed, and the screen lit up. The first image was a photograph of Leonardo with Mariana Stevens in London, clearly a couple in love. A murmur of confusion swept through the entire church. "This is Mariana Stevens," I announced, my voice firm and clear. Leonardo's first official wife. They were legally married for 2 complete years in London. Leonardo had gone completely pale. "Valentina, what exactly are you doing?" "I'm telling the complete truth," I replied, without looking at him. The second image, Leonardo with Carla and little Matthew at a birthday party. "This is Carla Mitchell," I continued relentlessly, Leonardo's current official wife. They have been legally married for 3 years and have a beautiful 2-year-old son named Matthew. The silence in the church was absolutely deafening. "And here," I said, as more images appeared on the screen, "are all the other women Leonardo has seriously dated in the last 5 years. All daughters of rich and influential businessmen, all completely deceived, all systematically used." Leonardo desperately tried to grab the microphone back, but I moved away. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, feeling a determined coldness take complete control of me, "my name is Valentina Vasquez, and I'm not just the daughter of a successful businessman." I made another signal, and a new image appeared, my professional private detective credentials. I'm a private detective specialized in matrimonial fraud and elaborate scams, and for 8 complete months, I meticulously investigated every lie, every scam, every crime that the man beside me systematically committed. The church had become silent chaos, people whispering, phones discreetly turning on, flashes going off. "Leonardo Mitchell," I said, finally turning to face him directly. "You thought you were deceiving a naive little rich girl who was easily manipulable, but in reality, you were confessing all your crimes to a highly qualified, professional investigator." He was in absolute panic. "Valentina, for God's sake." "No," I interrupted with authority. "Enough lies once and for all." I made the final combined signal. The main doors of the church opened dramatically, and Carla entered, carrying Matthew in her arms. Mariana stood up from the back of the church, and Detective Costa slowly approached the altar. "Leonardo Mitchell," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear perfectly, "you are officially under arrest for fraud, bigamy, and running a criminal organization." The rest happened in a surreal blur. Handcuffs being put on, Leonardo desperately screaming that it was all a terrible misunderstanding, guests standing up, photographing, compulsively recording, and me, in the middle of all that chaos, finally completely free. The weight I had carried for months had completely disappeared. 6 months later, I'm in my office, carefully analyzing a new complex case, when I see on television the news I had been waiting for months. Leonardo Mitchell is definitively sentenced to 8 years in prison for aggravated fraud and bigamy. The sophisticated con artist, who systematically deceived at least 6 different women over 5 years, had all his assets confiscated for complete reparation to the victims. Carla got definitive custody of Matthew and substantial compensation that guarantees a comfortable future for both of them. Mariana opened a successful NGO in London to help women who are victims of matrimonial scams. And me, I continue being a private detective. I continue investigating elaborate frauds. I continue helping women discover the truth about the men they love. But now I know something fundamental I didn't know before. The truth, however painful and devastating it may be, is always infinitely better than the most beautiful and convincing lie. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply showing the entire world who a person really is behind their masks. Throughout this entire process, my faith strengthened. On the most difficult nights, when the pain of betrayal seemed unbearable, I remembered my mother's words about God taking care of those who seek the truth. The small cross I always carry with me was my constant companion, reminding me I wasn't alone on this journey for justice. Leonardo Mitchell thought he was deceiving a naive and easily manipulable princess, In truth, he was methodically confessing all his crimes to the most relentless and determined detective in New York City, and that crucial difference made absolutely all the difference in the end.